On this episode of Get Real with Casey Kasem, I got to sit down with Ryan McDowell. You may know him as a Dynasty writer, commish, an innovator in the Dynasty fantasy football world, and co-owner of DLF, Dynasty League Football. He's also a host on DLF Dynasty Podcast and Locked On Dynasty. This episode was recorded in December. I thought I lost it, but luckily I did not. In this episode, we talked about his favorite things to write about, being a mad scientist when it comes to his unique Dynasty leagues, advice for breaking into the industry, and spending time with his family, plus a whole lot more. Make sure to follow Ryan on Twitter at RyanMC23. You can find me on Twitter at TheCaseyKasem, and you can also follow the podcast on Twitter at GetReal_pod. You can find my writing with the Fantasy Footballers. I have some new content coming out, so just wanted to let y'all know about that. This podcast is a proud member of the DAP Network. Anyway, thanks so much for checking out this episode, and now here's my chat with Ryan McDowell.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Awesome. You sound like you have a lot going on tonight.
Yeah. It's been a crazy few days in our house, but yeah, mostly good.
Well, that's good. Well, I'm going to try to bounce you away a little bit from fantasy football talk per se and get into the good stuff that people want to know. And
yeah, I love it.
Excellent. So, you're good.
We're just getting started.
Oh, just started. Okay.
I finished the other one.
Oh, now you're doing all stuff.
No. No.
Okay.
Perfect. See, this behind the scenes stuff.
It's like, what's happening in there?
So, Ryan, I was going to give all your information out because I'm used to doing that on podcasts, but we'll get to that as we're going. So we'll hit on everything.
That sounds great.
When did you start playing fantasy football exactly, and what got you into it?
Yeah, I need to think about what year it actually was. It's been about 15 years, but I'm a teacher in my day job, and teach elementary school. So there's very few men in general in elementary education, but in my building at the time when I was getting started several years ago, there was just one other male teacher. So we became quick friends, just by circumstance. And he was always talking about this fantasy football league that he had, and it was his college buddy league. And I'd never played fantasy football. I was familiar with it, but that was about it. But I had grown up like so many other people playing Madden, and my favorite part of that of video games like that was the season, right? I didn't even play the game, just sim the regular season, get to the trading and the drafting and building your team. So that's what I enjoyed so much. And the conversations that I had with my coworker, with my friend, were the same things. Who should I draft? And I got this trade offer, and everything he was saying sounded great to me. So I for years, it felt like, really, it was probably just for a few months, I was saying, if there's an opening in this league, because I didn't know how to join a league. I didn't know anything like that. And it certainly wasn't like it is now, that you can jump on Twitter and have a league put together within a few minutes. So I felt like, first of all, I knew I wanted to try this, but second of all, this was my only option. I was just waiting it out for someone to leave their league or something to happen. And eventually the next year, which was, I always know because it's Byron Leftwich. That was my first draft pick. So I would have to see, when did Byron Leftwich start in the league? It's like 2002, I think. So that's almost 20 years now. But they decide to expand this buddies league, this college buddies league. And I got one of the spots. And again, knew almost nothing about fantasy football. It's a dynasty league. So my first league is a dynasty league. And now I know, and as a commissioner, I know if I bring in an expanding, I'm going to have each team cut down some players. I'm going to give the new guy a great draft pick. That's not what happened. I built my team from the waiver wire. I had the last draft pick in the in the round, which is why I took Byron Leftwich. Still a terrible pick in hindsight, but yeah, so that's kind of what got me into playing fantasy football in the first place, and got my start in a dynasty league, which is kind of rare.
That is very rare. I have not heard that one before. Hey, you're the first. Were you into football in general growing up, or was that not your thing?
It wasn't my thing at all, which kind of makes this story even crazier. But yeah, living in Kentucky, of course, big college basketball, fan growing up, and my dad was a big baseball fan. So by default I was. So it was kind of baseball and college basketball. That's really what I was into and what I cared about as far as sports. And just the most casual form of a NFL fan is what I was. I'd watch the Super Bowl, and if I sat down on a Sunday afternoon and a game was on, I would watch it, but just not a huge fan. I never had and still don't have a favorite NFL team. So from that, I think has maybe helped a little bit in playing fantasy and playing dynasty. I know a lot of people will say they're stuck with their team, or maybe they avoid their team when it comes to building fantasy teams, but that's never been an issue for me. So really, once I got into this league with my friend, fell in love with it, found a bunch of other leagues, found some message boards. Again, we're talking about the early 2000s. So the Football Guys message board was huge for me, not only in learning how to play dynasty and how to play fantasy football, but with making some relationships and building some friendships as well.
Yeah, if you brought up message boards and forums. I feel like the two things that almost everybody I've had on this show have in common is that Madden was kind of a jumping off point for them, and then, like you said, the Football Guys message board, that's been on a lot of people's list as well. So pretty influential. And now we have Twitter. Do you think Twitter kind of took over the space that forums used to, or do you think forums are still as active? I'm not on forums, so I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm not either. And I don't have a bad thing to say about specifically the Shark Pool, right? The Football Guys message board. It taught me so much. I made, like I said, great friendships there, people that I'm still friends with and in fantasy leagues with today. But I don't visit that forum very often, very rarely, in fact, do I. And same thing, really for any other forum or message board. So for me, and obviously for so many other people, I do think Twitter has taken over. It's filled that gap for me as far as the conversation, and there's so much more you can get. I mean, I never ran into Matthew Berry on a forum, or I couldn't reach out to beat writers and ask them questions on forums. So it just, to me, it offers so much more.
It's really been a great tool, and I know that a lot of people have come up because of Twitter. They were found on Twitter. What is the story behind you being found as a writer?
So basically I kind of got active on Twitter around 2010 or so, 2011 maybe. And that was one thing that I felt like I always had going for me in fantasy leagues since I started playing. I wouldn't say I was the smartest or certainly not like the best scout. That's just not something I can do. I can't watch the game and analyze it like so many others can. But I was the most active player in my league. And when it comes to sending trade offers, working the waiver wire, just all of those things that go into having success as a fantasy player. And it was really it was the same thing on the message board. I mean, if you look back 15 years ago on Football Guys, you'll see a ton of posts and messages from me. And I was on there all the time, and now the same is true on Twitter. So I feel like I'm always on Twitter. I never really shut it down, which could be a could be a good or a bad thing, I guess, depending on who you ask. But
yeah, 100% on that.
So I was active immediately and kind of branching out into that fantasy football space. And at one point in early 2012, Eric Dickens from DLF reached out to me and basically said, we're looking to add some writers. Are you interested? And never really had much writing experience. I'm a teacher, so I feel like, I could do okay, but it wasn't something I was doing already on my own or for any other site or anything like that. But I was interested and joined the team. I think I was the second or third writer they brought on, which, now our team there is over 50 writers. So thinking we had two or three just sounds pretty crazy. But joined the team at DLF in 2012, and no looking back.
That's so cool. What was, do you remember the first thing that you wrote about over there?
Wow, I really don't. I probably should. I know I jumped right in, and it's funny. My friend, I talk about friendships from football guys. Probably the best for me, and really one of my best friends is Jeff Tiefertiller, that still writes for Football Guys. And I remember when Jeff got brought on to their team, to Football Guys, and we were in leagues together, and we had communicated with each other through the message board, and that kind of broke out to trading emails and trading text and things like that. But I remember when Jeff got hired, me telling him I would love to do something like that sometime, but I just don't think I could come up with ideas for articles. Like, I can't think of what to write about. And again, now looking back on that, it seems crazy, because I have a notebook here full of ideas and things that I'll probably never get to write about. I can't find the time, unfortunately. But that coming up with ideas for articles hasn't been the issue for me. It's more about finding the time and managing that piece of it. But I do remember once I joined DLF, just sending Eric lots of ideas. Could I write about this? Can I do this? And the answer to all of those was yes. And it's a good idea, and go for it. So I don't know what the specific first article was. I need to go back and try to find that.
Well, what's your favorite thing to write about? If you had one topic that you were like, wow, either it's outside of your comfort zone and that's why you like it, or because it's just something that's really a passion of yours.
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like at times at DLF, I've kind of spread myself too thin. Like, at one point I was kind of like the Devi guy. And even though I think there's 100 people that know that space better than me. And, I listened to your interview with Ray Garvin. He's at the top of that mountain, and has already reached heights I never got to. But, I tried to do Devi, and I run a lot of leagues. So I did commish stuff. And I would say it's probably those articles about running leagues, coming up with new league ideas. That's kind of been, when it comes down to it, that's probably what I've enjoyed the most, which is probably why Scott Fish and I get along so well. We're both, we're kind of mad scientists when it comes to dynasty leagues and fantasy leagues, trying to come up with crazy ideas that could be fun and challenging. So I've done a series called Keeping Dynasty Weird, and just about unique dynasty leagues or unique rules that you could try in your own dynasty league. That was probably one of my favorites. And even that's been several years now.
I'm not in a whole lot of leagues that are like crazy and out there, but I know that you are the genius, the creator of a lot of really cool leagues that you always see tweeted about on Twitter, and I kind of get jealous, on the inside, but then I'm like, yeah, let's play cool. But what are those leagues that you have created from this magical brain of yours, and what makes them different than other dynasty leagues?
Yeah, we've done a few different things. The one that I would say has probably been the most successful, the most popular are the kitchen sink leagues.
Mm-hmm.
And years ago, probably like 2013, maybe something like that. I remember sitting on Twitter and somebody had asked the question, and honestly, maybe it was me. I can't even remember, but somebody had asked the question, what's your favorite rule or your favorite format of Dynasty? And I remember getting into a conversation with Russell Clay about what we liked, and we play in Devy leagues and we like those. And I tried an auction league and I really like that. And Superflex leagues, again, we're talking several years ago now. So Superflex leagues were not the commonplace that they are now, but Superflex leagues are great. And it finally just hits me. Let's just do one league with all of this. So that's really what kitchen sink is, and hence the title, kind of everything but the kitchen sink. And some of my friends would say everything but the kitchen sink and IDP, because I'm not an IDP guy. So no IDP in those. Sorry.
Feel you on that one.
Yeah. But those have been fun leagues. All the things I mentioned, Superflex, Devy, they're contract leagues. So you've got that to consider. Their auction, we have up to 6 auctions every year, including rookie and a Devy auction, multiple free agent auctions. A rule I came up with called the second chance rule is included in those. Basically, you can throw back your team at any time without, you don't have to leave the league and just give up. You can put your team back and basically redraft or in our case, re-auction and kind of get a fresh start. So basically, it's just kind of a conglomeration of all the rules and the features of dynasty leagues that I was really enjoying at that time mixed into one. And we're going on, I don't know, we're getting close to 10 years in those leagues now. So we've got 5 of them, and tons of people playing them. They're pretty fun.
Yeah, I see it all the time. Hashtags here, hashtags there. I won this, and I'm like, well, that's pretty cool. I got
a spot for you if you want to jump in.
I know. Okay, here's the problem. So my second year playing Dynasty, I got, and this was only a few years ago. I got in a league that John Bosch had created. And it was like, I left that league after a year. I felt so bad. It's one of those situations, because I've seen that a lot lately on Twitter about people feeling bad about leaving leagues. Yeah. What are your thoughts on if you really feel like a league's not a league for you and you want out? How exactly do you think a person should go about doing that?
Well, first, just be honest with the commish and give them as much heads up as possible. That doesn't mean you walk away in the middle of the season. Right. I've had that happen to me before too, and honestly, just don't really appreciate it. I mean, if you make a commitment, if you pay your money, then ride it out. For the regular season, for the rest of the season, unless we're talking emergency situation. But once the time comes, listen, it happens. Everybody does it. You've done it. I've done it as well. That for whatever reason that league just is not a good fit for you. And there could be a lot of reasons. Mm-hmm. I guess, there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it, right? Like you don't want to leave the team just decimated when it comes to players, when it comes to draft picks. Trade away all your picks and then bail on the league. That's kind of a weak move. But in the end, I don't want, you don't want somebody to be forced to be your friend, right? And right. That's kind of what we're talking about, because that sincerity is not there. That effort is not going to be there if somebody doesn't really want to be in that league anymore.
So since you're giving out advice like that, I know you have I know you have a podcast that you do with Scott Fish, who we brought up earlier, the Commission Impossible podcast. So it's kind of along that lines of what we were just talking about, questions that the tough questions that commissioners need to know and want to know. What made you and Scott decide that was a podcast that you guys wanted to put out there for people?
Well, first of all, there wasn't anything like that at the time. I think I've seen a couple other kind of commish centric pods pop up since we started, which is awesome. The more information, the better. The more opinion out there, the better. But for us, it was just a topic that wasn't being discussed. And again, years ago, it felt like you just had fantasy football podcast, and even having a podcast that was dynasty only.
Yeah.
At one point kind of seemed weird. And of course now we have 100 of them, maybe more. But you started to see podcasts started focusing on specific topics. Maybe it's focused on trades. Trade addicts and there's been a few now.
Yeah, there are a bunch. That's why it's so hard to come up with, because there's a handful and they're all know their stuff.
Yeah. But basically you were starting to see those specialty niche podcast pop up, and we thought, maybe every league has a commissioner, right? So at least one person from every league should be hopefully interested in what we have to say. And if we can offer advice or help people or give them ideas or answer questions, then let's give it a shot.
That was a super awesome idea. I know that I wrote in and you guys answered my question one time, and I know that made me feel real cool. So I'm sure that everybody that writes in and gives you, do you guys get a lot of questions? I know it's not as as common for you guys to do that podcast now, but when you do you guys get an influx of questions to your inbox?
Yeah, we get a ton. And yeah, it has become an off-season only podcast, which I think makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
To me, as a fantasy, specifically as a dynasty commissioner, I know once week 1 kicks off, I kind of have that sigh of relief. Like, okay, my work is done. I mean, I need to make sure everybody's, submitting their lineups and nothing crazy happens during the regular season. But the work of the commish is really in the off season. So we decided that's when we would focus on our podcast. And now that the off season's here, we've already got a couple pods released, couple episodes released, and we'll be doing those hopefully every week, maybe even more throughout the off season. But yeah, we get a ton of questions, and we're glad to answer all of them.
Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out if you're a commish. I know it helped me out a lot. There are sometimes you just get in tricky situations as a commish, so it's good to have, both of you guys who've been in the business, and know how it runs, what works best and what doesn't. So let's go back a little bit, because we were talking earlier about the leagues with all the different rules and how, PPR wasn't a thing until it was a thing. We weren't talking about that, but PPR wasn't a thing until it was. And the same with the Superflex, which we were talking about. What do you think maybe in the next 5 to 10 years is going to be something that is common throughout leagues, not just the select few leagues that decide to implement the rule or whatever?
Well, first of all, I would say I hope we continue to see Superflex take over, because I know we kind of get wrapped up in our fantasy football Twitter bubble, and it seems like every league is Superflex. Yeah. That's not really how it is, right? And still the majority of leagues, the large majority of leagues are one quarterback. So I would just throw that in, that hopefully Superflex continues to grow and kind of become the norm. But outside of that, I really feel like it's going to kind of branch out. And this is probably a lot because of Scott, or partially at least because of Scott Fish as well. I think we're going to start to see leagues have really a varied scoring system. We're seeing leagues, some leagues use point per first down. We're seeing leagues use point per carry. We're seeing basically scoring systems get manipulated and changed, altered, really to appeal to that group of players in the league, which is how it should be.
Yeah.
Right. As long as those 10 or 12 or 14 people are happy with the scoring system, that's all that matters. And it doesn't have to match anything that's on a website or anything like that. It certainly doesn't have to be the default. So I don't know. That's kind of a cop-out answer because it's not one thing I think that's going to take over. I think it's just a variety of scoring systems specifically.
That's awesome because there does need to be some more people that aren't the degenerates like we are who are on Twitter every day that I can branch out and see that there's other ways that default doesn't mean you have to use it.
Yeah, I guess I think about IDP, and I've been talking with Tom Kislingberry and a couple others about this topic, the need for a standardized IDP scoring system. And again, I don't play IDP. I've tried it. I tried it for a couple of years.
Me too.
It wasn't really my thing. And no offense to anybody, but I got to a point recently where I was thinking, do we need this standardized scoring system? Is that something that is even necessary? Because I don't think we have it in normal fantasy leagues, non-IDP fantasy leagues. We're starting to go against that. And it used to be PPR or non-PPR, and that was kind of the only differentiator. But now we're talking about quarterback scoring, and that's starting to change. Some leagues want to penalize turnovers, especially interceptions more, which I'm on board with. And then, like I said, with the other scoring system, points per first downs or points per carry, there's so many things you can do with it that I don't know if a standardized scoring system is a positive thing, big picture.
Yeah, I don't know if it is either. You did make a lot of good points there. I didn't even think about how many wrinkles there are in so many different leagues. And I don't say it's hard that I convinced my home league to change over to PPR, or that it was hard for my home league to change over to Superflex. Yes, Superflex. It's a redraft league, but I'm like, but I know that having one set in stone thing, when I first started fantasy football, I thought that the default was the way it was, and we played till week 17 and all this other stuff. And the next year I was like, I'm going to commission my own league because I don't want to play till week 17, So how do you feel about people who shame people based on their score? Let's say their score is like super huge, and people go into the comments and want to say, oh, well, what kind of scoring is that? Now that you said that there's all kinds of scoring, what would you say to people that don't want people to have fun, basically?
I mean, I think it's pretty crazy because there's so many ways to play fantasy football, right? And like I said, and we say this on Commission Possible basically every episode. If you and your league are happy with it, that's all that matters. And if you want to score 100 points per touchdown and your scores are in the thousands, like, go for it. Who cares? So I mean, it's fair to question if you see a crazy score, like, hey, how'd that happen, or what's going on? But I don't think there. Right. I don't think there should be any shame with any of it. It's just different ways to play.
There's all kinds of ways to play, and you stick with the ones that you think are fun, and you get out of the ones that you don't think are fun. That's basically it. Yeah. Well, so Dynasty is something that I've probably started in the last 3 years or so, and like everybody says, once you leave redraft and go to Dynasty, you want to stay in Dynasty leagues. You want to get out of your redraft leagues.
That's what we like to hear.
Do you play in any redraft leagues besides the Scott Fishbowl, or are you pure Dynasty?
I did a couple, just kind of the best ball, for charity or something like that. Yeah. But as far as leagues where I was setting a lineup every week, I think SFB, Scott Fishbowl, was the only one, I believe.
And it's the best one. So I'll let you have that one. So what kind of advice do you have to people who are like me 3 years ago, who were like, I want to play Dynasty. I want to be in a Dynasty league, but I'm scared it's going to be too overwhelming?
Well, again, first of all, I would say you got to decide if you're ready for Dynasty, right? So if it gets to this time of year, right, the fantasy season is ending and the NFL regular season is ending. If you're still jacked up and ready to go, if you miss actually setting your lineup, and you're kind of disappointed that you don't get to have trade talks or check the waiver wire. I don't know if anybody's disappointed about not doing waivers, but basically, if you're sad to see the season end, you probably should be playing Dynasty.
Yeah.
If you consider yourself more of an NFL draft fan than a redraft fantasy player, you probably should be playing Dynasty. So once you actually decide to make the leap, like you did a few years ago, I think you just have to be active. Like it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Don't get to this point and think that you can take a break or you can just step away for a few months, because with Dynasty, there's always something to do, whether it's trades or waivers or prepping for the draft or whatever it might be.
Yeah, being active is very important. We were talking about trade. You were talking about trade addicts earlier, and I make sure that I'm in an outhouse or two leagues here and there, because like trade addicts is super back and forth. You don't stop trading. So yeah, that's a real fun part of Dynasty. Redraft, I try to get people to trade, and it just doesn't happen. It's just not the same.
Yeah, it's so tough in redraft because, early in the season, I think everybody's kind of got their team that they just drafted, right? You just built this team, so you're still, hopefully you're still happy with it, and you might not feel like you even have any weaknesses to address. And then by the time you figure out that you do have weaknesses to address, it's too late, right? You're 1-6, and trading with the best team in the league feels more like collusion or doing a favor for a friend than it does anything that's mutually beneficial.
Yeah, totally. That I didn't even think about that aspect of it too. So yeah, because it's not really going to help you out any if you're lower, unless your league does something with the last place people.
Yeah, I'm always surprised to even see trades in a redraft league. Like this might not be accurate, because again, I only play in one, and we're not allowed to trade. But to me, it just feels like there really are just hardly ever any trades in redraft leagues.
Yeah, I think I did one this year, and it was just because I was hurting so bad at running back. I had to do something. But with Dynasty, I think it's just more clear cut what you need to do. Like, you have your team for quote unquote forever. Right. So like you were saying, all that when you look at your roster too, when you're starting out in Dynasty, do you have any tips of the trade to help out with, a startup league, if they're doing a draft, what they need to like focus on or pay attention to?
Yeah, there's a lot. I would say where to begin. I would say have a good understanding on player value, and I think that's probably the hardest thing to do, making the move from redraft to Dynasty. I guess we could simplify it in saying younger players are worth more, older players are worth less, but you've got to know the rules of your Dynasty league, and that would be another kind of obvious tip, but it's something that's easy to miss as well. If you're used to a certain scoring system or a certain lineup, and even if that changes by a few points or by one position, it has a huge impact on your strategy. So I would say no player value, whether you do that through Twitter, whether you do that from DLF, our ADP that we offer. There's lots of ways to go about it, but just kind of understand that player value.
And the ADP that you put out, I know that you tweet out ADP all the time, and it's really interesting to see how it changes and moves every month, and you do a lot of mock drafts as well. When you do the mock drafts, is it super easy to get those filled? Or I'm guessing it's super easy to get those filled, but I see it, throughout the off season and things of that nature. So
yeah, so it's kind of hot and cold, I would say, like anything else. I've been running mocks for DLF since January of 2013, basically every single month since then, including the regular season. So we do 6 mocks every month in the off season. We do 4 mocks during the regular season. And yeah, sometimes it is tough to get people involved in those because it's a time commitment.
Yeah.
And I remember I was really interested in tracking ADP even before the mock drafts. And I never would have even thought of having someone do a 20 round mock draft. Like it just never even occurred to me. And then a couple of the guys, I think Mike Clay did a few mock drafts for when he was with PFF. Again, we're going back a few years. This was 2012. So Mike did a few mock drafts and I participated in a couple of them. And by the next year, I reached out to him, asked him if he was still going to do those. And he said he had not planned on it. And I kind of asked if it was, I asked for his blessing, if it was okay to take that and run with it. And of course it was fine with him. So that's when I started doing those. And no, it's not always easy. In February is when we always get the rookies added to the player pool. So it's usually easy to find people to participate in February. Kind of the hot spots, like right at May, right after the NFL draft. Now that we know the rookie landing spots, people usually want to do it then. But when you're asking 60 people every month to give up some of their time to do a mock draft that hopefully they benefit from the data and the information that we share at DLF, but in the long run, no direct benefit to them. So it's, I always appreciate when people are willing to join up with the mock drafts and share of their time.
So do you think that because most of the people that I'm guessing that most of the people that draft in those mock drafts are people that I've seen you tweeted or are like in the community,
Right.
Do you think that skews it for the common player that doesn't really pay that much attention to what's going on Twitter, what's going on the internet?
Yeah, maybe. I feel like when we're doing mock drafts in, March or July, June or July, when 99.9% of the people don't care at all about football, then this is data from the hardcore dynasty player.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if your league is if your league is one of the ones that is taking a break from January to June, then that data may not be as helpful to you, or it may not fit your league. But I think for our community and for the audience that we serve, I feel like it's beneficial and useful information.
Yeah. And plus, if you're playing Dynasty, you probably are out there paying attention to it at least. I mean, if you're in Dynasty, you're at least somewhat of a hardcore fantasy player. So you're probably paying attention.
I hope so,
yeah. And I know that you are now, you're part owner over with DLF as well?
Yes. Yep. Made that move a little over a year ago, July of 2019. So a year and a half ago, I guess. I was really honored to get that opportunity. Basically, the ownership team there, which consists of now 5 people, but at the time 4 people. There were 3 guys who got together and started DLF. Hanging out in their kitchen one day, just decided we can make a dynasty website, right? Yeah. Like nobody else is, kind of the same thing we said about podcasts. Nobody else has a dynasty website. We can make one. We can do this. And this is over 20 years ago, or nearly 20 years ago, I should say. So the 3 guys, Ken, and Jeff, started DLF. They brought in Eric Dickens a few years later, and then made me part of the ownership team a year and a half ago.
So cool.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people probably thought that you've always been, one of the even if it's just unofficial owner of DLF.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I remember, sorry to cut you off there.
No, you're good.
I remember when that announcement was made on Twitter. And of course, it was a great reception. I appreciated the thoughts and comments from everyone. But there were multiple people who said, "Oh, I thought you were already one of the owners. I just assumed that was already part of the deal." So that was kind of cool to see as well.
I mean, yeah, you are one of the faces of DLF, and you've been so instrumental in getting people just involved in fantasy football and wanting to write and wanting to do all of that stuff and podcasting. I know you do a lot of podcasting. So with DLF, you have a podcast over there. How did that idea come about, and how did you guys decide that you guys were going to co-host it together, you and Dan?
Yeah, so that's actually
Matt.
Yeah, and Matt as well.
Matt.
Yeah.
I was like, I like Matt Price.
We can leave Matt out. Whatever. No. Yeah, so we started the DLF Dynasty podcast. It was actually, again, the first Dynasty podcast that was out there, which sounds crazy because there's so dozens of them now. But again, we love the I don't even want to say competition. We love the options that are out there, right? Yeah. There's so many, so much Dynasty information, and that's great for the community as a whole. So for sure. I love it. But we started that and had a couple guys who stepped up to host the podcast, and I had no interest at all in doing that. I would say I would have been happy at that point if I never did a podcast in my life. Just not something I was comfortable with at the time, and honestly, still not something I'm totally comfortable with. Yeah. It's not. I don't know. It's not what I was made to do. Yeah. So I still feel, I feel a little. I don't know, feel a little off sometimes when I'm doing podcasts. And to me, it really comes down to who's on the show with me, right? Yeah. If and your comfort level with that person or those people. But in the case of the DLF pod, we had a team of Dan and Matt, and then Chad Scott was also there, and kind of that third chair bounced around a little bit. It was Chad Scott, it was Jeff Miller for a while, both of those great guys, and both much funnier than I am. But once they each stepped away, and Chad was the more recent one, once he stepped away, we needed somebody to do it. So I jumped right in and took that spot, and that's really all that. That's the whole story. It's not very exciting.
Well, it's kind of exciting because I didn't know the backstory behind it, and that's really I know I forgot Matt's name earlier when I was talking about him, but I really do think he's a great guy, the little zookeeper. But when you guys all got together for the very first time to host the show as we are the three hosts, right? What was going through your head at that time? How did you feel prior to? Were your nerves a mess? Were you calm, cool, and collected?
I would say I was pretty calm at that point because, well, first of all, they already kind of had their, they kind of already had it together. They had been doing the show together, so they knew how it worked. I was the new guy stepping in. But I'd also been doing other podcasts. I'd been doing the Dynasty Blueprint with Matt Williamson for a while at that point, and had been doing Commission Possible and some of the other pods. So at that point, I was at least used to doing podcasts, and Matt and Dan are both great guys and have become great friends over the years. It's the best part of that podcast and that relationship for me is just getting together with those guys. We've gotten to meet up. I've gotten to meet up with Dan a couple times. He's a little bit closer, and Matt's way out in California, but gotten to meet up with Matt once as well. Cool. So just the friendship that we've we've built together has been pretty great.
That is really great. Have you been able to meet anybody else from the fantasy community just based on your interactions on Twitter and then?
Yeah, quite a few.
Yeah.
And my wife jokes that every vacation we take has some kind of fantasy football related detour, whether we're stopping to have lunch with someone or whatever it might be. I know this past summer, of course, because of COVID and everything else, plans got changed. We were actually supposed to go to Disney World, which my family does basically every summer. We were going to meet up with the Milers there with Dan and his family, and that didn't happen. Disney was closed. So instead we went on a massive road trip. The 5 people in my family, my wife and I, and our 3 kiddos. And we met up with Nick Whalen. We met up with Scott Fish. The first time I got to meet Scott.
Cool.
Which was kind of surreal because it felt like we had we'd built such a friendship and a relationship, but had never actually met in person. So was great to do that. And then hung out with the Milers for a little while. We met up with Eric Dickens in Kansas City. I'm probably leaving somebody out. I'm going to feel terrible. Oh, we met Waz. We met up with Waz in Chicago.
Cool.
And all of those people, except for Scott, we had met before. The FF Expo, FF Midwest Expo. I'm probably butchering that.
I had Bob Long on, man.
Yeah.
We talked about it forever. It's a Midwest Fantasy Football Expo. Right?
Yeah.
There we go.
Sorry, Bob. But the first one of those was last year, or I guess it was 2019. And got to meet so many people that I had not met before. So yeah, I mean, I've probably met, 50 people that I follow on Twitter at this point, and love every interaction that I've gotten to have.
That's so cool and so crazy to think that you have friends that you met on the internet. Like we tell our kids, don't talk to strangers on the internet, and then here we are talking to strangers. Oh, but they're not. So what you're telling me is I should convince my wife that the next road trip we go on, we have to stop in certain cities, and then, oops, there's my fantasy football friend. Okay, good to know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
we did a road trip. I didn't think to do that.
I mean, we always, you're going to stop and have lunch or have dinner somewhere anyway. So
might as well.
As well
make another friend.
Yeah.
So, okay, I don't want to think about the little road trip I'm about to plan out after this.
Well, you had planned to go to Canton, right?
Yeah, I was going to do that. And we were so excited. I convinced my wife was like, all right, because she's got a friend out in Cleveland. She's like, all right, okay, we'll go out that way. And then, it got canceled. And then we were like, well, do we still just want to go out that way? And then we're like, no, it's not the right time to be doing that kind of stuff with COVID and everything. So next year, hopefully I'll be there.
Yeah.
Be
Same
fun.
here.
I mean, I was really looking forward to that because I really do want to get to meet people like you have. I've met a handful of people, but it'd be so dope to be able to, the people that you have conversations with all the time, to be able to actually sit down with them. So that's so cool.
Yeah, I guess the events, if there's something going on, I got to go to the Combine in February and got to meet a lot of people there. I met my co-host, Matt Williamson, had never met him in person. And Danny Kelly from The Ringer, and I'm probably leaving people out. Garrett Price, we hung out with Garrett a lot from Dynasty Nerds. So yeah, it was just, if there's some kind of event that whether it's the Expo or an NFL event, the draft or a Combine or something like that, people are going to be there.
Yeah. Yeah, I did that when they did it in Dallas, when they had the Dallas Fantasy Football Expo. I went to a couple of those, so that was pretty cool. Got a bunch of the Yahoo team when Brad was there at the time, Brad Evans and Liz and everything. It was pretty cool. So I know that I was talking about Brad last week, and I was talking about how we both missed our Scott Fishbowl pick. We were in the same division, and we both got hammered, so we both missed our picks.
Oh no.
Anyway, but yes, you can meet friends. So you were talking about Matt Williamson and how he's your co-host. It was formerly Dynasty Blueprint, like you said, and now it's Locked On Dynasty Football. How has that experience been with Matt, and how has was that the first podcast you ever participated in?
That was the first one that I was the host of.
Yeah.
So at that point, we're talking about 5 years ago ish now. I had done some guest spots on podcast and had been super nervous for every single one of them.
Yeah.
And never would have dreamed that I would have been hosting one of my own. But I knew Matt a little bit. He was working for ESPN at that point. We were in a couple of leagues with each other. And again, we had interacted on Twitter. So we were both familiar with each other. And he reached out one day and basically said that he was leaving ESPN. He had been doing a daily podcast with them, and he wanted to keep podcasting, and he wanted to do a Dynasty fantasy podcast. He was, at that point, he was fairly new to Dynasty, but like so many others, was falling in love with it and wanted to do more with it. And he wanted me to be his co-host. So, I mean, to me, that was a huge honor that he chose me. And I kind of, I had to think about it for a couple of days, because it was that, it was the fear that I had and the lack of comfort I had with the whole idea of it. But it was also it was a big opportunity for me. And that's, it's really helped me to kind of branch out and to grow and obviously become a little more comfortable with it. I'm certainly not the best podcast host. I don't pretend to be, but try to give my opinions and my thoughts and get those out there, hopefully pretty clearly. But it's been a great experience. And then just earlier this year, we got the opportunity to move over to join the Locked On Network, and David Locke there and his team has just done obviously an amazing job branching out and covering basically every sport there is. Yeah, everything. Locked On, and you fill in the blank with whatever team or sport you want. And they really do have it covered. It is impressive to see the level of management and just the system that they have in place over there.
Yes, you do a search for that and you get so much stuff if you don't know what you want. So know what you want, but definitely check out the Locked On Dynasty, because I was listening to it earlier today before I got on here, and the way that you guys talk with one another, it's like, I really like the communicate, the back and forth that you guys have. And that's what I think is really cool about a lot of podcast right now, because you can tell that the hosts are, at least get along in there.
Yeah.
If you had the choice to pick somebody to be your co-host, what kind of advice would you give to a person who basically can pick, they have the pick of the litter of who they want to come on and be a co-host with them? What kind of attributes do you think that person should have?
Again, just somebody you're comfortable with, right? Somebody you're friends with. And you don't always have that opportunity. Sometimes you build friendships through a podcast, not beforehand. I like on all of my podcasts, I think, that I don't always agree with my co-hosts, that we have those disagreements or we have varying opinions, but of course, we can do that and have those discussions respectfully and hopefully offer, different opinions that the listener can take away from it. And
I want to go back to the younger folks that are coming into the fantasy football realm right now that want to be podcast hosts or want to have video channels or any of even the bigger new medias like Twitch and I guess TikTok's a thing now. Yeah. But for those people that are just now coming up and they have, maybe they have 20 followers and they have content, but it's on their own blog or whatever, what kind of advice do you have for the quote unquote struggling artist, I guess, the person that wants to get out there, but just doesn't know where to start?
I've thought about this a lot because, I've tried to decide, and I don't know the answer. I've tried to decide if it's harder to break in now versus what it was 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, you didn't have the competition that you did now, right? Like now, everybody wants to write or pod or do whatever. You didn't have that several years ago, but you also didn't have a lot of the things you're talking about. You didn't have the opportunities, right? I mean, I know YouTube was around, but it wasn't being used like it is now, and Twitch and TikTok and all those other forms of media were not there. So it wasn't so easy just to start your own thing, right? And a lot of people, myself included, wouldn't even know how to start their own blog. And now pretty much anybody and everybody can do that. So I think the competition is certainly a lot harder now. And a lot deeper, but you also have so many paths that you can go down to hopefully get your work out there. And as far as specific advice, I would say, first of all, be unique. Coming up with a waiver wire article or buys and sells, like, honestly, everybody's doing that. Like, come up with something unique, whether it's data, just anything. Anything that's unique, anything that makes you special. The person, anytime I say that, or I hear anybody else kind of talk about the same thing, the person I think of is Matt Harmon. I mean, Matt Harmon had his thing that was special and unique to him that he built that nobody else was doing with reception, perception. And he turned it from a blog and basically climbed the ladder very quickly. Climbing the ladder is not even fair. He zoomed up that ladder from his own blog to the NFL Network and to Yahoo. So I've loved following Matt's career. It's been so impressive and really inspirational. But I mean, he did it. So I'm not going to say anybody can do it, because I think that was a great idea. That was great information that he was sharing. And not everybody is going to have that type of information. Not everybody is going to be skilled enough to not only come up with the idea, but to be able to execute it. It's not easy. He put in the work. He built basically his own brand. I know he's probably not comfortable with that terminology, but it really is true. So not everybody is going to be able to do that. It's not an easy thing. If it was, everybody would do it, right? But it is possible. Like, that path is there.
And I like how you build up the community, because we see it all the time that you're retweeting stuff or posting people's names that you think have been doing good for the community or have put out something nice. Or during Scott Fish Bowl, like, you tweeted about me doing my rap, and I was like, oh my God, he saw that. He saw that I did that. So,
I saw that.
Yeah, we all fangirl over that kind of stuff, though. And it means so much to us, the people that are, just trying to do something, it means so much to us when you bigger guys, tweet at us or do all that stuff and actually want to talk to us. So I try to tell you guys all that, like, keep it up. Like, you're really helping a lot of people out with that.
Well, I'm glad to. And first of all, I don't consider myself like a bigger guy. That's not me. I mean, I don't think of myself in that sense. Right. But at the same time, if I can help anyone, if I can help promote people's work, I'm glad to do that. And I know one thing that really stuck with me when back to the Midwest Expo that from 2019, I got to meet so many people, and some of them I was familiar with before meeting them, and some were brand new to me. But so many people thanked me for the FF follows list that I used to put together. And I guess I was just really surprised, because that was something I did and didn't think too much about. I guess I didn't realize what an impact that had. But several people that weekend mentioned that, and like I said, that just stuck with me, and it was pretty cool to see that I was helping people and making an impact in that way.
I love that. I want to be that kind of person that I can tweet out your name and people go over and follow, a certain person that I tweet out. I just want to be that person that helps. So it's really cool to see you do it. And I hear people say, oh, I got the Ryan McDowell bump and, all this stuff. I'm like, one day they'll call on me.
Like, that's crazy to me.
Yeah.
That's even said. But I mean, I think you're in good shape. You got the Matthew Berry bump a couple times recently.
Yeah,
I've seen that.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just like, oh, that is, thank you. And it doesn't mean a ton to all of us. So it's really cool that you guys do that. And I really feel like this podcast is just getting you guys to come on here so that I can just give you so many compliments and make you feel awkward and but I'm just telling you what I know. So let's talk a little bit just before we go. I have a whole section that I wanted to talk to you about, but I've got the bullet points in my brain here because you're a real big family guy. And I know that you were talking about being a teacher as well. And on top of that, you do the DLF stuff and right. You're out there doing all kinds of podcasts and everything else. How do you manage to juggle all of that and kind of get it all balanced out that you don't burn out basically?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, a lot of it comes down to having a very understanding wife that and honestly, I wouldn't suggest everyone do this. I mean, sometimes it feels like my priorities are a little out of order. If I'm doing a podcast and or writing an article and my son wants me to play catch with him or play a video game with him or whatever. And sometimes I have to say I can't or I will later. Sometimes that sucks. So I wouldn't suggest just everyone do that. But things are busy. Wife and 3 kids and a full-time job. And DLF and Roto World and 3 podcasts and things are busy. But like I said, very understanding wife. She helps me. Not only does she carry the weight around, around the house and managing our family, but she also helps me with football stuff. She is the editor of my podcast, and if I have any type of big project, if I'm working on some league stuff and setting up draft order or figuring out payouts this time of year, she's usually alongside me, helping me with that.
Let me time mark where that is real quick so that I can cut it out and send it to your wife so she can listen to that over and over. Yeah, that it is great to have a good support system within your family. And I know that you have 3 kids and that the fantasy community loves Grayson. How has that felt to have all of that love coming in from us to him?
Yeah. It's pretty cool. I was actually looking back at some old tweets just last night from his birthday back in May. And of course we're quarantined and we're not, definitely no birthday party or anything like that. And I just mentioned something along the lines of Grayson's birthday coming up and enjoying watching videos or birthday messages or something like that. And they came flooding in. So awesome. It really is cool. I do have to, sometimes my older 2 children, I've got 3. Grayson is our youngest. Sometimes they're like, did you tweet about me? Did you tweet out my picture? Or it's a good reminder, not only not that I have to tweet about them, but just to keep things balanced, because I mean, for your listeners that might not know, Grayson is our youngest, and he has Down syndrome and has had open heart surgery in his young life, and is just a pretty cool kid. And I'll put out pictures or updates about him on Twitter, and people do genuinely seem interested, which is pretty cool. And again, it's the thing I love most about Twitter is building friendships and those relationships. And I mean, honestly, at this point, like I said, I teach in an elementary school with a bunch of ladies. So
yeah,
some of my, maybe even most of my really great friendships are through Twitter at this point, and people that went from answering questions or talking about a player to conversing in DMs to text to phone calls to meetups in real life. And whether it's that level of relationship and friendship supporting Grayson, or just someone who may not even know me, saying happy birthday or asking about him, it's pretty cool.
That is so awesome. The fantasy community, yeah, like here right now is the number one reason why the stick to football people need to go away for a little bit, because it is so cool to be able to make these relationships, and people get to like know your family through you and see how you have a life outside of fantasy football. Like you can do that. And so it's really cool. And the friend thing too, because most of my friends don't care about fantasy football or football in general. So to have a spot where you can go and talk about it is super cool. Yeah. During this quarantine, during COVID and everything, I know that all aspects of your life have been kind of shaken. How has COVID, well, let's start with the easy part now. I don't know if this is the easy part, but how has it changed how you parent? I mean, how being a parent has been during the quarantine?
Well, we've just been together a lot more. And my wife and I are both teachers, so we've been teaching from home. We've been trying to parent and teach our own children from home, including teaching special ed, basically, with Grayson. So it's been a challenge. Sometimes we need a little break from each other. But I mean, I think there are, from a parent perspective, I think there's a lot of opportunity to teach your children about what they're seeing. And of course, not only are we seeing issues with COVID and with the vaccine and the way people are reacting to that, but everything else that has gone on in our world really over the past few months. We're just outside of Louisville, so we've had a lot of social injustice and a lot of conversations about those things with Breonna Taylor here, with the Breonna Taylor situation here in town, and it's led to a lot of tough conversations. My oldest two kiddos are 13 and 11, and lots of questions from them. So just that time together and everything that we've experienced over the past 9 months or so, kind of, it feels like we've lived a lifetime mashed into this 9-month period.
Okay, so not the easy question out of all.
That's okay. No. That's all right.
No, I don't have kids, so like I know. So and being a teacher, I have teacher friends, but they just basically tell me they cry every day. So I'm going to ask you, how has COVID kind of knocked you off your feet, basically, when it comes to the teaching world?
Yeah, that's exactly what it has done. So at this point, we've had at home, we call it at home learning in our school district, but basically virtual learning. We've had 3 sessions of that. So the end of the school year, which was basically from March 13th through the end of the school year, we were virtual, and it was a disaster, right? Like teachers had, at least our teachers had 2 days to get ready for what we thought was 2 weeks off of school, or not off of school, but 2 weeks of at home learning. And that turned into over 2 months of virtual learning, which we were not ready for. And I think one of the most frustrating things about all this, and it's not really anybody's fault, it's just kind of the way it's gone, but the rules just keep changing, right? Like mask help, or they don't really help, or, you can, like, specifically related to teaching, you can come in the building, but only for this amount of time, and then you can't come in the building at all. And now you can you can bring students into the building, but only this many. So it's just kind of the changing rules and the changing landscape of everything. But the first at-home learning session at the end of last school year was terrible. It was a mess, and it was just survival mode. We started the school year, this school year, at home as well. It was a little bit better, but the beginning of any school year is tough. Obviously for students, but for teachers as well, right? You're trying to learn your students, and you're trying to squeeze in all of that beginning of school year stuff. And we were doing that through Zoom, and that was not fun. So this last session, which has basically been for the past 6 or 8 weeks, I guess, has been a lot better. The rules have loosened a little bit, I guess. So we've been able to bring students into the school in small groups for limited time. So we're still doing the Zoom thing, but we're also bringing students in those small groups, 5 at a time, 2 hours at a time. And that's been a ton better. So I'm actually transitioning from teaching 5th grade to teaching PE starting next week. So that's going to be a whole new challenge, teaching PE over the computer. But we are set to go back to school in person starting in mid-January. And still a little anxiety about that, obviously. But also excited to go back and knowing we can follow those protocols and do things the right way, and it'll be good to have kiddos in class.
I bet it will be. I bet it. I mean, I can't even imagine. I just can't. So to hear it, from your mouth telling me how it's been, I still can't even. That's crazy. So I guess this might be the easiest one. Or I don't know. Who knows now? It sounds like it's all hard. Fantasy football content, putting it out, getting it out, and with all the changes in the games being played almost every single day of the week and the middle of the day or whatever. Like, what have you had to overcome? How did you kind of get on track? And was there anything that you were just like, whatever, I'm not even gonna, somebody else can deal with that?
Yeah, that's how I felt with a lot of this. Yeah, I guess fantasy football is probably the easiest and maybe the least important of those 3 topics when it comes to reacting to COVID. I mean, a lot of last offseason leading up to the NFL season was just trying to figure out what happens if, right? What happens if the season is canceled? What happens if games are canceled? And so many of the things, even so many of the things that happened, we didn't foresee. It was good to prepare for those things, but we also had no idea what was going to happen. Like you said, games in the middle of the day and games getting pushed back 2 or 3 days and backup players and all of this craziness. But when it comes to producing content for that, for the most part, it's just been a matter of let's just keep going, right? Mm-hmm. Let's just keep doing our best. If we've got people interested, if we've got readers or listeners or paying customers who want this information, we're going to keep giving it to them. I do know at one point at DLF, we did have to take a step back and say, okay, we're not going to produce as much content this month because we're not even sure if there's going to be a season.
Yeah.
And if the season gets canceled, then what do we do? Right. Yeah. Do people want their money back? Can we keep paying our writers? And those were questions I'm sure every site, especially smaller, relatively smaller sites like ours. I mean, we're not ESPN here, right?
Yeah.
Every site was dealing with. So luckily, I mean, honestly, those were some of our most successful months that we've had from a business standpoint. And it was probably because everybody was at home, right? Yes. Everybody was
100%
soaking it in and joining new dynasty leagues. Yep. Way too many, probably in most cases, in my case as well.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of a concern there, but it ended up being a huge success for us.
Yeah. I think that is one thing that you're bringing up that I 100% agree with you on. I was shaking my head the whole time. I feel like I spent more money on DFS since I've been at home. I feel like I started this podcast during the quarantine because I didn't have anything else to do, and now my wife's like, is this what you do when I'm out of town for work? So, before we go, before I have you give all your information out, even though we've touched on most of it, you're a big Yankees fan.
Yeah.
What is one memory that elicits the most emotions in you, whether they be good emotions, bad emotions, or like a specific moment that just kind of touched you?
Yeah, there's a ton. So I mentioned at the top of the show that my dad grew up as a baseball fan. Right. Therefore, I grew up as a baseball fan. So he was one of 5 brothers growing up in the 50s and 60s. And back then, baseball was all that mattered when it came to sports. So in his family, like I said, there were 5 brothers, and they were so competitive that they didn't even want to cheer for the same team. So they each end up picking a different team. And it was kind of those classic baseball teams that the Red Sox and the Yankees and the Cardinals, and we're pretty close to Cincinnati, so there was a Reds fan in there, and I think the Dodgers was the last one. But my dad was the Yankees fan of the group, and so I became a huge Yankee fan when I started caring about sports. We're talking when I was 10 years old in the mid 80s, and the Yankees were terrible. The 23 in my Twitter handle comes from Don Mattingly, who was number 23, and he was the only good thing really that the Yankees had going at that point. So in the mid 90s, when they finally started winning, all I heard was, "You're a bandwagon fan, and how are you a Yankee fan in Kentucky?" and things like that. But probably the moment or the play that always sticks with me from a Yankees perspective is Derek Jeter with the flip, right? So the play is a play at the plate, Jorge Posada ready to catch the ball and make the tag, but the throw is offline. It's not going to arrive at the right spot. And Jeter comes from shortstop basically over to the first baseline in one motion, grabs the ball, flips it to Jorge Posada, and he tags Jeremy Giambi and gets the out. So not only was it just a great play to watch, but understanding that Jeter knew exactly what was going on. He saw the play, he knew where he had to be, and he was aggressive enough to go make the play, even though it probably should have been Tino Martinez or somebody else making that play. Jeter went out of his way to make sure that it happened. And that's the one that sticks with me.
That's great. I wish I liked baseball. Like, I'm such a fair weather fan of baseball. It's so bad. Like when the Rangers were in the World Series, I was like, yeah, they're my favorite team. And now I'm like so about football, like my brain hurts.
Yeah, my baseball fandom and really my college basketball fandom as well have definitely taken back seats to football and to fantasy football. So I think that's a pretty normal thing, but I still cheer for my teams.
Yeah, for sure. So Ryan, before we go, if you don't mind, we can find you and all that jazz.
Yeah, I'm glad to. So you can find most of my work at dynastyleaguefootball.com. Also do a little work mainly in season for Roto World, covering some dynasty stuff for them. Check out my podcast. I think we've mentioned them all here. Commission Impossible with Scott Fish, Locked On Dynasty with Matt Williamson, and the DLF Dynasty podcast with Matt Price and Dan Myler. Let's see what else. You can follow me on Twitter at RyanMC23. And I think that's it.
Yep. And if you missed anything, I'll make sure to talk about it, link it at the very beginning, so everything will be groovy. All right. Good. I appreciate you coming on, Ryan. It was real fun. I'm excited to have you on, so I'm glad that you could come on. And you guys stay rad. Talk to you later.